In late 1984, the first of a new breed of Soviet submarine slipped into the ocean. It was called the Akula class, and almost immediately, Western intelligence realized something was terribly wrong. For decades, NATO had held a crucial advantage in the Cold War. Their passive acoustic detection network could easily track noisy Soviet submarines. But this new vessel was different. It exhibited a precipitous drop in radiated noise, gliding through the water with an eerie silence that rendered existing tracking systems nearly obsolete. It was a leap forward in engineering that the Soviet Union was not supposed to be capable of. The secret behind this sudden acoustic invisibility wasn't developed in a Soviet laboratory. It was bought, smuggled, and installed through a staggering betrayal of international trade laws, orchestrated by some of the most prominent corporations in the Allied world.
To understand how this happened, you have to look at how the West guarded its technological supremacy. The Coordinating Committee for Multilateral Export Controls, or COCOM, was established to prevent the Soviet Union and its allies from getting their hands on advanced Western technology. High on the restricted list were multi-axis CNC milling machines. Submarine stealth relies heavily on the shape and precision of its propellers. High-skew, multi-bladed propellers can push heavy vessels through the water without generating the tiny, noisy bubbles known as cavitation. But manufacturing these complex marine propeller geometries requires massive, computer-controlled milling machines capable of simultaneously cutting along multiple axes with exact precision. The Soviet Union simply did not have this manufacturing capability. To bridge this critical gap, a KGB-linked state purchasing agency called Techmoshimport began looking outward, eventually approaching a Japanese trading firm in 1980.
The Japanese firm Wako Koeki specialized in trade with the communist bloc. Recognizing the lucrative potential, they initiated a complex multinational negotiation. On April 24, 1981, in Moscow, a series of contracts were signed. Acting as an intermediary was the Japanese trading house C. Ito & Company. But the actual hardware would come from two manufacturing heavyweights. Toshiba Machine Company, a subsidiary majority owned by the Japanese tech giant Toshiba Corporation, agreed to supply highly restricted MBP-110 and MF series milling machines equipped with 9-axis simultaneous control. To guide these mechanical behemoths, the Norwegian state-owned defense contractor, Kongsberg Våpenfabrik, acting through its trade division, agreed to supply NC-2000 numerical controllers and specialized CAD/CAM software. The total contract value was massive, approximately $17 million for Toshiba Machine and $10.4 million for Kongsberg. The deal was set, but now they had to move the equipment.
Moving equipment of this scale and sophistication past Japanese customs required blatant deception. In May of 1981, Toshiba Machine submitted export applications to MITI, Japan's Ministry of International Trade and Industry. To bypass the strict COCOM embargoes, the applications were completely falsified. They claimed the highly advanced 9-axis machines were nothing more than basic 2-axis vertical lathes, equipment common enough to avoid suspicion. The deception worked. Between December 1982 and early 1984, the MPP-110 milling machines were successfully shipped from Japan and installed at the Baltic shipyard in Leningrad. The operation was massive in scale, requiring technical support and installation teams to ensure the highly restricted machinery was fully operational on Soviet soil. Once paired with the Norwegian software tailored to calculate and mill complex marine propeller geometry, the Soviet Navy suddenly possessed one of the most advanced propeller manufacturing facilities on the planet.
The result of this illicit transfer was a catastrophic loss of NATO's underwater advantage. The Toshiba Kongsberg hardware enabled the Soviet Navy to finally manufacture the high-skew, multi-bladed propellers they desperately needed. There is an interesting historical discrepancy regarding exactly when this machinery made its mark. U.S. officials initially attributed the stealth of the very first Akula submarine directly to the Toshiba machines. However, construction on that first Akula hull actually predated the operational capability of the Leningrad milling machines. But while the first sub was built before the machines were fully online, the Toshiba and Kongsberg equipment was soon put to relentless use. It allowed the Soviet Navy to refit their existing fleet of Victor III-class submarines and to mass-produce these whisper-quiet propellers for all subsequent hulls, including the heavily upgraded Akula II and Sierra classes.
The U.S. military soon realized their passive acoustic detection network was failing to track the newly upgraded Soviet fleet. The financial implications were staggering. Estimates from the United States Department of Defense calculated that regaining their lost passive acoustic detection advantage would cost the U.S. taxpayer anywhere between $1 billion and $100 billion. For a time, U.S. defense sources claimed the illegal plot was discovered purely through the acoustic detection of these quieter submarines. But historical documents tell a different story. The breakthrough actually came from inside the operation. In December 1985, Kazuo Kumagai, the Moscow office manager for Wako Koeki and a primary architect of the initial deal, blew the whistle. He reported the illegal transaction and provided hard evidence directly to COCOM headquarters in Paris, setting the stage for a massive geopolitical confrontation.
Initially, Kumagai's evidence was met with denial. In April 1986, the Japanese government conducted an initial investigation, but dismissed the allegations as unsubstantiated. It took nearly a year for the geopolitical pressure to boil over. In March 1987, the U.S. Pentagon formally presented its own intelligence on the breach to the Japanese government. Faced with undeniable proof from their closest ally, Japanese authorities finally acted, arresting 2 Toshiba Machine executives in May for trade law violations. The fallout in the United States was explosive. By July, furious U.S. lawmakers, including Representatives Helen Delich Bentley and Duncan Hunter, were physically smashing Toshiba electronics on the lawn of Capitol Hill. The intense pressure forced the resignations of Shoichi Saba and Sugichiro Watari, the chairman and president of the parent company, Toshiba Corporation. The once quiet corporate boardroom had become the center of a major international crisis.
In March 1988, the Tokyo District Court fined Toshiba Machine 2 million yen and handed suspended sentences to the executives. By August, President Ronald Reagan signed the Omnibus Trade and Competitiveness Act, imposing severe sanctions on both Toshiba Machine and Kongsberg. A fierce debate remained over corporate complicity. Toshiba Corporation claimed they had no prior knowledge, asserting that only a rogue faction within Toshiba Machine carried out the illegal sale. U.S. investigators strongly disagreed, maintaining that falsifying plates, testing protocols, and customs filings required widespread, systemic coordination.
The propeller betrayal exposes the fragile nature of geopolitical supremacy. A decades-long, multi-billion-dollar military advantage wasn't defeated by superior enemy engineering or a battlefield victory. It was dismantled by corporate greed, falsified paperwork, and a handful of businessmen willing to sell the ultimate silent weapon to the highest bidder.